right, so welcome back to Crunch Time Kitchen. It's kind of hot today, so forgive me for glistening. It's not my natural glow. It's a sweaty glisten today, I'll be honest. So we have all of our ingredients gathered here. So we're gonna start with the ground beef. I'm using ground turkey and it's frozen, so so I'm gonna go ahead and get that started. What we're making is a shepherd's pie. And so today, just to make it kind of quick, we're using instant mashed potatoes. But if you have your own mashed potatoes that you would like to make, the recipe is on there that you should have gotten a link to. And they're fairly easy. The thing that takes the most time is boiling the potatoes. So just, if you prefer that, then go for it. So I'm gonna get a pan out. So shepherd's pie originated, I believe, in Ireland. And so, let me see, I'm just fact checking on that. Yeah, Ireland. And so, a lot of countries have their own version of it, but it's basically like a really thick stew with mashed potatoes on top of it as the crust, as the most traditional way that it's made. So it's got some ground meat, some ground vegetables, and they have some variations on this recipe, which I really like. And so if you wanted to do it vegetarian, you could use like bulgur wheat or, like some sort of meat substitute that mimics ground beef. You can actually use chopped beef if you prefer like a nice cut of beef and you want it cubed, you could do that too. But yeah, it's basically just like kind of like a pot pie, but instead of a crust, there's mashed potatoes. And I think traditionally it's made with lamb, actually, which is really cool. So you can feel free to play with the meats. Like I said, I'm using turkey, I'm not using beef. So yeah, go nuts. So I'm gonna put this on the stove. So we're gonna do a tablespoon of olive oil and then just put this in to cook, and then we're gonna chop our vegetables. So you want to turn the heat on like medium high. And then I usually like to let my pan get a little bit hot before I put the oil in. And then about a tablespoon of oil. Feel free to measure if you're not comfortable, no shame in that. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my ground turkey in there. And if your meat is frozen, just be careful of any sort of popping, because when it's really hot, it might kind of jump out at you because of the water. Since I touched raw turkey, I'm gonna wash my hands, which we all know how to do so well after all the education these past few months with coronavirus, which is awesome. If you weren't doing it already, now you know. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep an eye on that while we chop our vegetables, and I just usually use like a wooden or plastic spoon to move it around. Obviously, it's going to need a little bit to cook, so we'll set that aside for when it's ready. All right, so here we have our vegetables. So we have an onion. I'm not using mushrooms because my husband doesn't like them, but feel free to use them. And then, let's see, we also have carrots. And we have celery, and then I'm just going to use some pre-diced garlic that I have.
Yes.
Let's see. So vegetables are washed. So I'm just going to cut the end off the celery, and just remember our knife safety. Just keep your fingers curled and well away from the knife. So I usually cut it in 2 sections like this, and then I kind of hold it on the side and cut it into little slivers, because we're looking for a fine dice. So kind of do that, and then just cut it into little pieces like that. Like every 5 or so, you can go ahead and move your move your fingers out of the way. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, okay. Is it blocking? Oh, okay. Right here. There you go. You can hear our meat starting to get crazy, so we'll take a look at that after we chop up the celery. So we're gonna cook this all the way up to when it goes in the oven, and then you guys can go from there. It takes about 20 minutes in the oven, and that's really, like, everything is pretty much cooked already. So you can just cook it basically until your potatoes are cooked, or yeah, until your potatoes are kind of browned on top, and go from there. And I'm actually going to cut an extra rib of celery, or stalk of celery, since we're not using mushrooms, just to have a little extra bulk in there. And in case you didn't see, I'm just basically cutting off like right where the white is kind of starting to turn into the green, just a little area. If you already have pre-trimmed celery, you don't need to do that because it's already nice and clean. And celery is what's called an aromatic. So I think we might have talked about it last time, but it's basically celery, carrot, and onion are your three aromatics, the main aromatics that you use. And when you cut them together, it's called mirepoix, and it's a French word, and it's M-I-R-E-P-O-I-X. So you see some trendy like food businesses that are called mirepoix, and everybody's like, "Oh, what does that mean?" It just means carrots, onions, and celery. So calm down.
Are you required to say it in a French accent when you say mirepoix?
No, because I mean, I feel like I said it pretty Valley Girl, so.
Mirepoix?
Mirepoix. So, but yeah, if you want to do your French, like the authentic way, is mirepoix.
Yeah, mirepoix.
So I didn't really explain how I cut the carrots, but I'll explain on the next one. Because I kind of, since they are such an interesting shape and it changes, I cut them a little bit differently. So I cut them in half, and I cut the top half and the bottom half differently, to clarify.
Can you do a shout out to our Instagram Live fam?
Shout out to our Instagram Live fam. Thanks for joining us. So basically what I do is I cut the carrot down the middle like this. And then just put a little pressure, but make sure you're in control of your knife at all times so it doesn't go like this and cut you, because that would be really bad. Yeah, I've seen that happen to people before. Yeah, it's pretty scary. And then just kind of cut it into strips. And then if you want a smaller dice, then you can cut it again this way. But we're just going to leave it like this because it's a little easier. And I also like my shepherd's pie a little bit more chunky. So like I was talking about, instead if you don't want to use ground beef, you can use chunk beef. You can also do like a larger dice with your vegetables, because this is kind of considered a small dice. There's also medium dice and large dice. And hopefully we'll be able to do an episode on knife cuts pretty soon, because they're pretty cool. Like you can learn about julienne and like all the different types of cuts that can make your food look really cool and professional. And the main reason for cutting your food in a uniform way is so it cooks more evenly, because you know, sometimes like that's why you see stir fries, everything is kind of cut the same, the meat and the vegetables, because then it all cooks pretty evenly, and you don't have to worry about like one being super soggy like your bell pepper and then your carrots being super hard still. And also the order that you put them in matters as well. So that way the harder stuff you put in first so it has more cooking time. And then everything is kind of done at the same time. All right, I can smell my meat, so I'm going to go over here. And if you want to just go ahead and get frozen, frozen diced carrots or canned diced carrots. Those vegetables work just as well. That's totally fine. No one's going to judge you. And if they do, just don't give them any food. Simple. Let me see. What else? So next we're going to cut our onion, which is always fun. You know what, a really interesting trick that people say to do is to chew bubble gum to keep you from crying. And that's pretty interesting because it actually works. I've tried it. It works for me at least. And I think it's because it activates your salivary glands and everything is kind of connected. And so I think that your salivary glands are like, we have this issue to deal with. We have to, there's something in the mouth, we have to get it wet so we can't produce tears. So I don't know. That's as scientific as I can get.
We had a question from Brenda Time. What spices did you put in the turkey?
Oh, you know, I haven't put any spices in the turkey yet. I'm just gonna go ahead and cook the turkey first since we're bringing it together kind of like as a stew. Then the spices will go ahead and get in there. But if you want, you can add some salt and pepper to the turkey. And then since we're using garlic later on, like a little bit of garlic powder might work. And then just maybe a herb like oregano would be nice too. So
We've
like
had a
dried
lot of people
oregano.
coming in and out, so let's do a reminder of what we're cooking and who
Okay.
you are and what they're watching.
Sure. Oh yeah, I didn't introduce myself. So this is Crunch Time Kitchen. I'm Gloria, and I'm a chef and dietitian, and I really like to help people just with food in general. So if it's about just making meals, if you're short on time, which is why I love this concept. If you're wondering about how to make meals a little bit healthier or lighter, then that works too. And just learning about food, just like any sort of tips and tricks that I can just pass on to you would be great. So right now we're making shepherd's pie, and we're going all the way up to when it goes in the oven. So I'm kind of doing the onion like the really non-skilled way, because there is a nice way to cut the onion, but since we're just kind of rough chopping everything, then you don't need to cover that. We'll do that in a different episode. I think I did it last time for the, what was it? What did we make last time? Yeah, Thai basil chicken, which was really good. And I think that episode is available.
Yes, on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's available on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out, because that was an amazing dish. Everybody loved it. So, all right, let me just check on my recipe and see how we're doing.
Someone also mentioned that they wish they knew how to cook, and it made me think of a question of like, how do you get over kind of like the barrier of like looking at a recipe and being like, it feels too challenging or too advanced, I don't even want to attempt it. Like, how do you kind of get over the mental hurdle of looking at a recipe and feeling like you don't want to attempt something very difficult?
I think if you just kind of just go in there and make mistakes, you know, I think that's the best way to get comfortable in the kitchen. Another thing I would recommend is getting some really quality tools, like getting a really good knife. Personally, I think a chef's knife like this is like the only knife that you really need in your kitchen to do most things. But of course, a knife set is great. So because you have the smaller knives, like paring knives, and then knives to bone chicken out and everything with. But I mean, you can pretty much do everything with a chef's knife.
You don't have to be like Top Chef in here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, watching videos, because there's so many videos out there nowadays, just kind of look up the recipe that you're trying to do, or just look up some simple ones. And a lot of the ingredients might seem intimidating, but don't be afraid to substitute, because cooking is not like baking where it's like scientific and you have to have the exact amounts of everything and everything has to be the exact type and stuff like that. So some videos of people doing it, because if it says like slice an onion, you might not even know where to start with that. So just go just Google slicing an onion or Google the recipe you're trying to do. And I know a lot of blogs like Food Network and what are some other ones? Like New York Times Cooking and Bon Appetit and things like that have videos that go along with their recipes. So there's a step-by-step and it's really easy to do. I'm gonna stir our meat around a little bit. And that's pretty much done, so I'm just gonna shut that off for now while it waits for us.
Oh.
So yeah, I would say just start simple. Start with things that are that have a few steps, or just once again on the internet, just look up beginning cooking or just simple recipes with just a few steps and a few ingredients, and then you can go from there and build it up as you feel more confident. But I think just getting in the kitchen and trying something first is the main thing to just kind of get over that apprehension of getting in there.
Just go for it.
Yeah. And kits help too. So if you have, I know they sell some kits in the store that come with the ingredients, the directions and all that stuff, and it takes a lot of the work out. They might be a little bit pricier, but maybe it's worth it to invest in that just to try it once, just to have the whole recipe walkthrough and have everything there already. And then it works out really well. Okay, so let's see. Let's read through our recipe. So we are on step 2, browning the meat. And we don't have any grease left over because we use turkey.
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay because we just use some vegetable oil, and then we'll add a little bit more oil later if we need to with the vegetables. So we're gonna saute the onions, and then we're gonna do the carrots, celery, mushrooms, and garlic. So we're gonna saute all those until they're softened. So let's go ahead and do that.
We're gonna end it here on Instagram Live, but if you jump over to our calendar page or our Facebook page, we have the link that we are broadcasting live. And also, if you don't have time to watch right now, it will be on our YouTube channel later. So Gloria, say goodbye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so we'll see you later.
So I'm transferring the meat into a different container just so that we can set it aside and then cook the vegetables. If you want to do it in a separate pan, then that's fine, but I personally like to go the route of as few dishes as possible.
Always
Makes
a
for
good
easier
plan.
cleanup. If there are if there are some bits of meat stuck to the pan, don't worry about that because everything's going to the same place. So I'm going to add another tablespoon of oil since our meat didn't have very much fat in it. And then just let that warm up. Oh, sorry, veggies are here. And then just kind of scoop I'm going to let that heat up a little bit because it'll taste better. Because if you put the ovens in, sorry, I'm having word problems today. If you put the onions in when it's not quite hot yet, they end up kind of steaming, and they're still good, but it's just a little bit of a different texture. If you throw them in when it's already hot, then they brown a little bit better, and there's a little bit more flavor, because it's what's called the Maillard reaction, another French word.
Maillard
reaction, where the sugars caramelize on the outside. So it happens on meat, it happens on vegetables, and it just gives you that nice brown, crunchy exterior that gives you a little bit more flavor. So I usually throw a few pieces in just to hear that sound and make sure it's ready to sizzle. And then we'll put all the rest of the onions in. And then if a few carrots or celery want to come along, that's fine. I put them in the same bowl. Once again, fewer dishes, so to me it's worth it to have a few friends joining the onion.
Are you up on high heat or?
I'm on medium high. So just make sure that you are on medium or medium high because the onions will burn pretty quickly if you are not, or if you're on like high. So I like to shake the pan around and then just kind of let them sit a little bit it says to cook these for about 5 minutes and then the other veggies for about 7. And so we're going to kind of do a little bit of a quick version of that since it's going in the oven. So you just want to make sure and get that color on them. And it is better not to rush it, but if you want to turn the heat up a little bit higher, which I'm going to do right now, just for the sake of our time, and then just kind of keep it moving.
Nice and brown already.
Yeah. So you can turn it higher, just make sure you keep it moving so nothing burns. But then you do want to make sure and let them sit a little bit so that they are cooking. So if you move them too much, then they won't really cook as well. So if you think of something like a stir fry, it's on high heat for a long time, or for a very short time, because you're just kind of flash cooking everything because you still want the vegetables to be crunchy. And the meat is usually cut really small or really thin, so it cooks quickly. And so this is kind of like a down from a stir fry, where you're cooking the veggies kind of low and slow, so that the flavors develop a little bit more, since it's going in a like a stew type dish, and they're going to be soft anyway. So
They're looking really good.
yeah. So I'm going to call that ready, and then I'm going to throw all this in since we're on high heat. Oops. Okay, and then I'm just going to give that a stir. Depending on the size of your pan, you can toss it if you're comfortable doing that, or shake it. But mine is a little bit shallow, so I'm just going to go ahead and stir. And then also make sure that you have a saute pan, another French word, where it has this sloped sides, not straight sides, because if the sides are straight on it, then the steam and the liquid will kind of collect in the bottom. And once again, you'll get that kind of like steam reaction, or like the steam cooking method of the vegetables, and they just won't come out the same way. With this, the heat is able to escape up the sides, the steam is able to escape, and the liquid evaporates a little bit better. So it's definitely more of what we're looking for. So I'm supposed to be adding garlic in here, so I'm gonna just grab it out of the fridge. So it's basically minced garlic in a jar, and it's like probably like 100 cloves or so. And so it's just in a little bit of oil, I think. And so I just usually do about a teaspoon per garlic clove. So I'm gonna do, is it 2? Let me check the recipe. Oh, it's 4 cloves of garlic. Okay. So let's do a little bit more. I love garlic, so I'm not going to measure that. But if you are using minced garlic and you're measuring, then just do about a teaspoon per clove that it calls for. Okay, so then work that in. So you can see the carrots starting to get brighter and a little, you can't tell from there, but they're a little bit softer. And everything is starting to look good. So let me look at the next step of the recipe and see where to go from there. So we're gonna stir the flour in, and then basically everything else. So we got a 1/4 cup of flour. And for baking, they always say to measure flour by spooning it in and then leveling it off. So I'm just gonna kind of do a little bit of that. I'm gonna kind of pour it in. But for this, it doesn't matter as much because you won't, like the reason why you spoon it in for baking is so you don't have as dense of a cake. Whoops, making a mess. Don't do what I did, use a spoon or scoop it. And so you just kind of sprinkle it over. And what we're doing right now is basically making a roux.
Another French word.
Another French word. So my husband calls this the micro shakes. I don't know why I'm able to shake like that well, but so just kind of sprinkle it over all the vegetables. And so our goal here, well, let me explain what a roux is. A roux is a mixture of flour and fat. So these vegetables have a little bit of fat on them, the olive oil. You know, the best roux, of course, is with butter and flour, but it works just as well with olive oil. It's just a little bit more flavorful and a little bit creamier with the butter, but this is gonna thicken up really nicely and make us our little sauce. So we're doing this, let's see here. And I'm just gonna stir this around. And so as we're doing this, the flour is mixing with the fat. And we want to make sure and cook the flour so that it doesn't have that sort of like floury taste. Like if you've ever had a piece of sourdough bread or something that has flour on the outside and it, you know, it's a little bit too much and it tastes like straight flour, it's not always the best. So we just want to make sure that we kind of stir it until we see very little white. Because that means the flour is all mixed with the fat and with the juices of the vegetables as well. And then we're going to go ahead and throw our... So I've pre-made my own stock and frozen it, so it's kind of fancy. But if you have your own, or if you have a stock that's canned, or a stock that is, what else, boxed?
Yeah.
Then that is totally fine too. Those are perfectly good. I just like to use the bones and from any chicken or beef or any meat that I cook and make some stock because I feel like I like to use as much of what I buy as possible, even the things that most people throw away. So the difference also between stock and broth is that stock is made by boiling some bones in water. And usually stock has bones and vegetables. So it's actually mirepoix, it's actually carrots, celery, and onion, just kind of the ends or the trimmings. You can use full ones if you want to, but it's kind of nice because you're able to use those scraps. So the ends of carrot, celery, and onion with the bones of whatever leftover meat you have, or the bones that are left over from whatever meat you had. So here's our sauce that's starting to form. You can see it's starting to gather along the bottom around our vegetables. So yeah, so stock is made from bones and it tends to be a little bit thicker, and when you chill it, it's actually kind of like Jell-O because it takes the gelatin from the bones, like the protein from the bones, and gets thick. And then it makes for like a nice thick sauce. And so broth is basically water and meat. So like the actual meat, for like if you put a piece of chicken, like a chicken breast, in some water and just you'll notice that when you pour the water off, it's a little bit yellow, or maybe a little bit brown. And so that is now broth that you have. So usually some of the bones that I have some meat attached to them still. So it's a nice combination of stock and broth. So it's just really flavorful. It's something really nice to have just in the kitchen, like in your freezer. And it's basically free because you paid for your meat or whatever. And then it's just like a little nice addition from the garbage or whatever you want to call it, from your meat, the leftover,
The scraps.
The scraps that you would have thrown away. So, all right. So now I'm gonna get the other ingredients while this is kind of sizzling away, simmering away. I'm gonna turn the heat down a little bit because I remembered that I turned it up. So I'm gonna go down to like medium. And tomato paste is really incredible. It's just like full of flavor, and it's in spaghetti sauce and different tomato products, and it just gives it that richer flavor. Basically just pureed tomatoes. 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. So I just scoop it out and then kind of drag it across. And then if you're comfortable using your finger, which I am, just go ahead and scrape it out of there and make sure you get everything. Let's see. So there's Worcestershire, 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. And Worcestershire is basically like molasses and vinegar. It tastes kind of like A1 sauce or steak sauce. So if you're not sure about what it is, I wouldn't recommend using soy sauce as an alternative, but some people say that that works, but then it gives your dish more of like an Asian flavor, which is fine, but just want to make sure that it's best to use the ingredients if you can find them. And Worcestershire you can find in any grocery store. And Worcestershire is spelled like Worcestershire, in case you're having a hard time.
You want to show it?
Oh, yeah. Worcestershire.
To the camera. A little further up. Yeah.
There you go.
Worcestershire.
And I think that's the like the only brand I've really seen.
Yeah, actually, in Parents, I don't think anybody even wants to compete.
Yeah, they probably cornered the market on it. So you can see how nice and thick our sauce is already, and that's the flour. So if you ever have any sauce or any soup or anything that looks like it's not really thickening very well, just sprinkle a little bit of flour. Just make sure not to, just do it really thinly, so that you don't get clumps in there, because the clumps are not fun because they basically cook on the outside and then it's like a pocket of flour and it's really gross. So I'm putting in some dried rosemary. You can use fresh rosemary, but if you're using dried, remember that the flavor is more powerful. So just use about half of what you would use, because drying it out intensifies the flavor. So if you use the full amount, the same amount as fresh, then it'll be really, really strong and it won't taste very good.
Overpowering.
Yeah, it'll be overpowering. So I'm going to mix that in. See what else. And I think the recipe that we're using calls for wine, but it says you can substitute stock. I drank all my wine, so I don't have any. But feel free.
That's what the wine is for. It's for drinking water.
It is.
Cooking.
Yeah. They should put that in the recipe. That's what my dad always told me growing up. But yeah, so if you're going to use wine, please use red. White won't taste as good because the rule is that red meat, I know turkey is technically white meat, but all the other flavors in this are like the earthier flavors. So we want to go ahead and use red for that.
You can skip over, like, just put it in, make your mashed potatoes, put it on top, and throw it. Do that too.
All right, so then we're stirring in the meat. And you notice I have some kind of big chunks of meat. So just, I don't really mind them, but if you want to cut them a little bit smaller, the meat should be softer now, and especially when it gets in the sauce, then it'll get even smaller. So we're stirring that in. And then, oh my gosh, this looks great. Okay, so now I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to get a tasting spoon and just try a little bit of it. Try to get a little bit of everything, just in case something tastes a little bit different. A little bit, you just want to make sure that everything tastes good. So like the meat might taste good by itself, or like the seasoning might be good for the meat, but we might need a little bit more for the celery or tomato. So just get a little bit of everything. Make sure you blow on it. And I think we're going to add a little bit of salt. and then it should be good to go. So now what I'm going to do is just put it in my pan. We're pretty much done. And then what's left is to spread the mashed potatoes over it and put it in the oven until the mashed potatoes are brown. So you can see all this is cooked like I was saying earlier. So all you have to do, sorry, scraping is loud. So all you have to do is just put this in the oven on 400 until the potatoes are crispy and brown on top, and then you're done. So you don't have to worry about the intermixture being cooked because this is all nice and cooked already. Make sure that you do season your mashed potatoes well, unless if they're in a bag, they're probably seasoned pretty well already. But if you're making your own, make sure to season them because this is seasoned well, but you want to make sure that your mashed potatoes have a good flavor too, and that they're not taking all the seasoning from this. And then just spread it flat and go from there. And if you want to get fancy, you can pipe the mashed potatoes on top in a nice pattern, or you can just plop them on and spread them, and that works well too. Just remember that if you have little peaks of stuff, it's probably going to get browner and burn. So try not to have too stiff of peaks if you are piping them on there.
So the level playing field.
Yes, level playing field.
Got it. Got it.
All right, and that's pretty much it for this episode. I didn't want to go all the way to the end with you guys because it's pretty simple the rest of the way out. And then next time I'll try to have a, like a ready one for you so that you can see what it looks like. And yeah, have a great time cooking and enjoy what you made. And yeah, just be confident in the kitchen and everything will work out great.